Hello, and welcome to the midweek episode of Views of an Outsider, the Outsider's View from February 10th. I swear there is more to report every week. A few days under this administration is like a year's worth of news. So let's start at the intersection of international affairs. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu headed to the White House to become the first foreign leader to be hosted by the new administration, which is appropriate considering the shameful way that the left behaved during his last visit when they behaved like ghetto frat brats with trust funds and released maggots into his hotel. That is not how you treat a head of state, whether you like him or not. This time, the two heads of state discussed completing the total elimination of Hamas and the probability that Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accords, as well as what to do about Iran's race towards developing a cheaper, dirtier nuclear bomb in the wake of the political changes throughout the world, not to mention its own significantly diminished power in the region in the wake of the destruction of most of its proxy terror groups, who were effectively blown up with their own beepers and rendered useless, especially to their now ex-wives. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu held a press conference together in order to lay out a change of strategy in the region going forward. After all, the Oslo Accords have consistently failed for 3 decades now, and a new approach is clearly needed in the wake of so much death and suffering. Palestinians have been offered 90% of their demands throughout the many decades of attempted negotiations, and they have never accepted any deal during 80 years of trying. They had the self-destructive judgment to elect a known terrorist group, Hamas, to govern them, which has worked out oh so well for them. And even recent events have not opened their eyes to their need to make better choices. They elected Hamas knowing that the group would start wars that they and their children would be killed in. They supported the genocide and atrocities that were committed indiscriminately against innocent children on October 7th, and the overwhelming majority of them, at least 70+%, still support both Hamas and the October 7th massacre by all of the available polling information. Not to mention all of the evidence of the past 8 decades points to their complete lack of a desire to live in peace, during which time they have started countless wars and learned from none of them, nor have they grown at all more willing to negotiate or live in peace with their neighbors. The majority of them clearly have no desire to ever end the violence. They don't want a two-state solution. The two-state solution is a Western myth and a fantasy. It is not what the Palestinians want themselves, and it has failed regardless. There has been enough death. It's time for a new approach. The Abraham Accords proved that a Palestinian state was not a priority for the Arab world, contrary to what we have always been told, because Arab countries demonstrated their willingness to sign on for peace without a solution for that problem being a part of the deal. Trump realizes that if a two-state solution was realistic and workable, then it would have worked out by now. The genocide of all the Jews in Israel and indeed throughout all of the world, or the obliteration of the state of Israel, is not an option that is on the table. So a new plan is needed, and it has been needed for nigh on a century now. You've had 80 years to try it your way. You failed, and you have no new ideas to try, so it's someone else's turn. Trump announced that the United States would take over the Gaza Strip. Here's what he had to say.
I also strongly believe that the Gaza Strip, which has been a symbol of death and destruction for so many decades and so bad for the people anywhere near it, and especially those who live there, and frankly, who's been really very unlucky. It's been very unlucky. It's been an unlucky place for a long time. Being in its presence just has not been good. And it should not go through a process of rebuilding and occupation by the same people that have really stood there and fought for it and lived there and died there and lived a miserable existence there. Instead, we should go to other countries of interest with humanitarian hearts, and there are many of them that want to do this and build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza, ending the death and destruction and, frankly, bad luck. This can be paid for by neighboring countries of great wealth. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12. It could be numerous sites, or it could be one large site. But the people will be able to live in comfort and peace, and we'll make sure something really spectacular is done. They're going to have peace. They're not going to be shot at and killed and destroyed like this civilization of wonderful people has had to endure. The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job. Do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. I'm hopeful that this ceasefire could be the beginning of a larger and more enduring peace that will end the bloodshed and killing once and for all.
Better ideas? Hey, forget better. Heck, I'll settle for just any alternative new ideas. No? Then I don't really care about your complaining unless you have a better solution to accompany it. Otherwise, you are just being a bunch of useless whiners that are serving no function for anyone, least of all the Palestinian people. And you are clearly only interested in saying no to everything, which means that you are championing the continuation of the cycle of war and death, and that means that the bloodshed that goes on in the next 6th Gazan war is on you. Besides, if Gaza is an open-air prison, as you love to claim, then why do you want the Gazan people to be forced to stay there? And if the Gazans who are currently living in Gaza are refugees in a refugee camp who have been forced out of their real homes, then how can the claim that Gaza is their home and it would be cruel to make them leave also be true at the same time? You can't have it both ways, at least not with any legitimacy.
To follow up on what you were saying about the Gazans leaving Gaza, going to other countries, one, where exactly are you suggesting that they should go? And two, are you saying they should return after it's rebuilt? And if not, who do you envision living there?
I envision world people living there, the world's people. I think you'll make that into an international, unbelievable place. I think the potential in the Gaza Strip is unbelievable. And I think the entire world, representatives from all over the world will be there, and they'll live there. Palestinians also. Palestinians will live there. Many people will live there. But they've tried the other, and they've tried it for decades and decades and decades. It's not going to work. It didn't work. It will never work. And you have to learn from history. History is, just can't let it keep repeating itself. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad.
Where do those people go in the meantime, Mr. President?
But more importantly than that is the people that have been absolutely destroyed, that live there now, can live in peace in a much better situation because they're living in hell. And those people will now be able to live in peace. We'll make sure that it's done world class. It'll be wonderful for the people. Palestinians mostly we're talking about. And I have a feeling that despite them saying no, I have a feeling that the king in Jordan and that the general president, but that the general in Egypt will open their hearts and will give us the kind of land that we need to get this done, and people can live in harmony and a peace.
Would Palestinians have the right to return to Gaza if they left while the rebuilding was happening?
It would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places on earth. If we can build something for them in one of the countries, and it could be Jordan, it could be Egypt, it could be other countries, and you could build 4 or 5 or 6 areas. It doesn't have to be one area, but you take certain areas and you build really good quality housing, like a beautiful town, like someplace where they can live and not die.
Gaza was the home of thousands of Israelis up through 2008, when they were forcefully removed by their own country's soldiers. Transitions are difficult, but this is a difficult problem, because it is not a land dispute, it is a religious war. One that is no less fanatical, brutal, or motivated by any more pure motives than any of the religious wars that were fought during the ancient past. We need a better, actual long-term solution with a viable future for stability and peace in the region.
You are talking tonight about the United States taking over a sovereign territory. What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there, redevelopment? And Mr. Prime Minister, do you see this idea as a way to expand the boundaries of Israel and to have a longer peace, even though the Israeli people know how important that land is to you and your citizens, just as the space is inherited by the Palestinians as well?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a really magnificent area that nobody would know. Nobody can look because all they see is death and destruction and rubble and demolished buildings falling all over. It's just a terrible sight. I've studied this very closely over a lot of months, and I've seen it from every different angle, and it's a very, very dangerous place to be, and it's only going to get worse. And I think this is an idea that's gotten tremendous, and I'm talking about from the highest level of leadership, gotten tremendous praise. And if the United States can help to bring stability and peace in the Middle East, we'll do that. Baby?
I mentioned again tonight our 3 goals, and the third goal is to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level. He sees a different future for that piece of land that has been the focus of so much terrorism, so many attacks against us, so many trials and so many tribulations. He has a different idea. And I think it's worth paying attention to this. We're talking about it. He's exploring it with his people, with his staff. I think it's something that could change history. And it's worthwhile really pursuing this avenue.
Look, the definition of insanity is repeating the same experiment over and over while expecting it to have a different result this time. So after 80 years of doing that very thing, all you whalers out there who would go on running the same bloody experiment for the next 80 years and beyond are objectively insane and will just have to find a way to cope. Trump made it clear that we would not be sending American troops to accomplish this. Pete Hegseth added this when questioned.
I would just say to the question of Gaza, the definition of insanity is attempting to do the same thing over and over and over again. And as the President and Prime Minister pointed out last night, the President is willing to think outside the box, look for new and unique dynamic ways to solve problems that have felt like they're intractable. So we look forward to more conversations about that, creative solutions to that. And as the man tasked with leading the Defense Department here, we're prepared to look at all options, as we've said.
Mr. Secretary, are you have a plan to send troops to Gaza? Are you working on options for the President right now that would involve U.S. troops in Gaza?
The President is involved in very complex and high-level negotiations of great consequence to both the United States and the State of Israel, and we look forward to working with our allies, our counterparts, both diplomatically and militarily, to look at all options. But we certainly would not get ahead of the President or provide any details about what we may or may not do. That's just bad military.
On Wednesday, Hamas agreed to hand over the bodies of Sherry Bibas and her 2 innocent babies, which is the best conclusion available after the brutal atrocities and crimes against humanity that Hamas committed irrevocably against them. May they rest in peace. Trump also announced that we would be ending our support for the UN Human Rights Council and UNRWA. I applaud that decision. It is time to put an end to our involvement in both of these malignant, corrupt organizations. This is such fantastic news that it can only be described as an answer to prayer. This is a personal issue for me, and one that I've gone to a lot of trouble to educate myself on. I would remind anyone who may not know that my very first Substack series was a 3-part synopsis of the entire history of this conflict, going back more than 1,000 years BC, all the way up through the modern politics.
I ended the last administration's de facto arms embargo on over $1 billion in military assistance for Israel.
Good.
And I'm also pleased to announce that this afternoon the United States withdrew from the anti-Semitic UN Human Rights Council and ended all of the support for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which funneled money to Hamas and which was very disloyal to humanity. Today I also took action to restore a maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime, and we will once again enforce the most aggressive possible sanctions, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and diminish the regime's capacity to fund terror throughout the region and throughout the world. We're working very hard to get all the hostages. The word is all, and we are working very hard. So far it's been moving along fairly rapidly, pretty much on schedule. I'd love to have them all out at one time, but we're taking them out, and tomorrow more are being released, and over the days more, and then we'll go into a phase 2. But we'd like to get all of the hostages, and if we don't, it will just make us somewhat more violent. I will tell you that, because they would have broken their word.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. As you just heard, Trump also announced a new Iran policy. He announced an executive order to crack down on Iran in order to try to increase the pressure on them in the hopes of preventing them from obtaining nuclear weapons, and also to incentivize them to cease their support for their terrorist proxies. Here is what he had to say when asked about concerns he may have of Iranian threats to assassinate him.
If it's Iran and their proxies who threaten to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out so long.
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do. Not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left.
FAFO. In other words, make his day. Give him an excuse if you dare. This ain't bluffing Biden that you're dealing with anymore. He's right. Do it, and we will obliterate you. That entire region of the world will still be radioactive decades from now. But if you have a death wish, I'd not shed a tear for the Iranian government. I would, however, feel very bad for the Iranian people, who are really quite moderate and deserve much better than the tyranny under which they are currently forced to live. Also this week, Trump secured the removal of many of the shipping fees for the United States shipping in the Panama Canal.
Secretary of State Rubio is in Panama right now, and we're talking about the Panama Canal. What they've done is terrible. They violated the agreement. They're not allowed to violate the agreement. China's running the Panama Canal. That was not given to China. That was given to Panama foolishly. But they violated the agreement, and we're going to take it back, or something very powerful is going to happen.
Also, Trump got Panama to agree to not renew the Belt and Roads Agreement with China in favor of strengthening U.S. ties instead. Panama is the first Latin American nation to leave this initiative, in which China gives goodies in exchange for gaining foreign control. Other countries that were considering joining are now reconsidering their plans as well. 70% of the traffic that goes through the Panama Canal is either going to or coming from the United States. We spent 10 years building that canal. Thousands of Americans died in order to build it. We spent enormous amounts of our wealth and resources to build the canal. Panama didn't conceive of the idea to build it, nor did they succeed in actually doing so themselves. They didn't build it, they didn't pay for it, and they aren't the primary ones who use it. Their one and only claim to counter our own is that Jimmy Carter maliciously gave it away to them, even though it wasn't his to give, in exchange for no benefits to his own people, whom he betrayed. And at the very least, the result of that agreement should not ever be that our canal can be used against us by our foreign enemies. That small condition is far from being too much to ask. So if we can come to an agreement on that, I don't see why there should be a problem for either of us going forward. In other news, 6 American hostages were freed from Venezuela after pressure from the 2-week-old Trump administration was applied. Biden, if he even tried to get our people back, failed dismally to actually do so. Trump succeeded, for which he has my gratitude. The new Secretary of State put out a piece in the Wall Street Journal discussing how American focus and resources will now be heavily redirected back to the Western Hemisphere, including focusing our attention on the mass immigration crisis coming from Latin and South America. The Trump administration also killed any American aid that was being sent to the criminally corrupt nation of South Africa, which is good. They have replaced the absolute evil of their apartheid system with a new evil system that encourages the open persecution, property seizure, and even violence against its white citizens now. Rather than focusing on their own infamous human rights violations, they have been happy to play the role of lapdog and fulfill the role as puppets, leading the way on behalf of their benefactors concerning condemnation of Israel in the International Criminal Court, which we now also openly oppose. South Africa has made their false accusations against Israel in the ICC based on propaganda and extremely deceitful grounds. I'm looking at you right now, Mrs. George Clooney.
You said that you were going to cut aid from South Africa. Will you plan to cut aid across other African nations, and why South Africa?
No, it's only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
An executive order was also issued to sanction the International Criminal Court, which is a corrupt hive of blatant, unapologetic, anti-Semitic villains. The order includes both financial sanctions and visa restrictions against certain ICC officials and their family members who assisted in investigations into U.S. citizens and their allies. The United States has thankfully never been a member of the International Criminal Court, but non-participation in an organization this corrupt is not good enough, just like it wouldn't have been good enough to not participate in Nazi Germany. It is entirely appropriate that an oppositional stance be taken, and these sanctions make our position crystal clear. On Saturday, Trump ordered Pete Hegseth to carry out military airstrikes in Somalia in order to take out a senior ISIS planner and the other terrorists who had been recruited by him. This came just weeks after ISIS terrorists killed 14 people and injured dozens more in New Orleans as Americans celebrated the start of the new year. The strike succeeded in destroying the caves in which the terrorists were living without harming any civilians in the process. This sent a message to anyone planning to harm Americans that, quote, "We will find you and we will kill you." Many stories at the start of this week centered around the news that Trump was going to be launching massive tariffs against Canada, China, and Mexico. Mexico and Canada would both receive 25% blanket tariffs, and China would receive a 10% blanket tariff on their products, with exceptions being made for the oil coming in from Canada. The media freaked out, prophesying everyone's doom, despite knowing that President Trump has a history of frequently using the threat of tariffs as leverage for what he actually wants, like he did only last week by imposing a 25% tariff on Colombia in order to force them to accept the return of deported illegal immigrants from their country. This is often Trump's preferred method of playing chicken internationally.
Mr. President, is there anything China, Canada, and Mexico can do tonight to forestall your implementation of tariffs tomorrow?
No. Not right now, no.
Not a negotiating tool?
No, it's not. No, it's pure economic. We have big deficits with, as you know, with all three of them. And in one case, they're sending massive amounts of fentanyl, killing hundreds of thousands of people a year with the fentanyl. And in the other two cases, they're making it possible for this poison to get in, number one. And number two, we have big deficits, and it's something we're doing. And we'll possibly very substantially increase it or not. We'll see how it is. But it's a lot of money coming to the United States. As you know, we have about a $200 billion deficit with Canada, getting close to $200 billion. They've treated us very unfairly. And I say, why should we be subsidizing Canada? It's wonderful. I have so many friends in Canada. It's a great place.
Is there a concession you're looking for, sir?
No, we're not looking for a concession. And we'll just see what happens. We'll see what happens. And with Mexico, it's the same thing. We have a $250 billion deficit, and we have a lot of people coming into the border, and now we've largely stopped that, but we've stopped that ourselves. And I think they've done a fantastic job. You've seen the numbers. They've dropped to almost zero. But we've suffered under the past administration for years and years. We've suffered with millions of criminals coming into our country. Criminals, people from jails from all over the world. They come through Mexico, and they come through Canada too. A lot of them come through Canada, and a lot of fentanyl comes through Canada. And China makes the fentanyl. China makes the fentanyl, gives it to Mexico, puts it through Canada, puts it through different places, mostly Mexico, but also a lot through Canada. And so all three haven't treated us very well.
By Monday morning, he got the concessions that he initially pretended he did not want from Mexico when they agreed to put 10,000 additional Mexican soldiers on the border in order to carry their share of the weight in stopping both the flow of fentanyl and the flow of illegal migration into our country. In exchange for which, Trump agreed to pause the tariffs for 1 month, during which time we will renegotiate a new trade deal through the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and other officials. My only initial reaction when I first heard the news over the weekend was concerning Canada. The question at that point being, so what does Trump want from them? And if Pierre Poilievre was already in power in Canada right now, that is exactly what he would have been asking Trump, because he is both capable and intelligent, and he instinctively understands the game that is being played here. Trump was giving hints at the time concerning what he wanted from Canada by saying things like Canada doesn't allow U.S. banks to do business there, as well as mentioning the drugs that have come into our country through their open border. Trudeau, who is completely unfit to play games with the big boys, announced retaliatory tariffs on the United States.
Tonight, I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. This will include immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, followed by further tariffs on $125 billion worth of American products in 21 days' time to allow Canadian companies and supply chains to seek to find alternatives.
He, unlike Polyev, had absolutely no idea at all what game was being played here, because he's a narcissistic, empty-headed bimbo that has been way out of his league for a decade now, during which time he has single-handedly devastated his own country, proving his impressive levels of incompetence. Trudeau went on to say that the most defining trait of what it means to be a Canadian is to not be an American. I don't know. I tend to think that if I asked actual Canadians what it means to them to be a Canadian, I think it would mean more to them than simply not being an American, because if not, that would be pretty sad if your whole national identity is actually centered around someone else's national identity and being the anti-them. But for the sake of argument, since that's what being a Canadian means to you, Trudeau, not being an American, let's think about that for a moment. If by not being American, you mean people who live under your thumb and as a result now make half of the income that Americans make while paying twice as much for their expenses like housing, as their incompetent leader makes the working people's life so unlivable that they are committing suicide via government-sanctioned eugenics at alarming rates that have resulted in that becoming the 5th leading cause of death in your country, while their prime minister parties like a 13-year-old girl handing out friendship bracelets at a Taylor Swift concert like a creepy pedo, and dressing up in blackface, then, yeah, I would have to agree with you. That's some real un-American shit you got going on up there, my man. You're completely right. We don't go for that down here. Unfortunately for you, I don't think that's many Canadians' idea of Canada either, which is why they've ousted your privileged, preppy ass. You see, my problem was that I didn't understand that was what you were actually going for. So now that I understand that your goal all along was to be as un-American as possible when it comes to embracing personal liberty and the successful flourishing of your people, and that you actually wanted to go in the opposite direction, I can now say that you hit the bullseye, dude. Here I was thinking that you were an abject and complete failure to your people, on such a scale that you will be studied by future generations as an example of what not to do. But now I know that you actually succeeded in doing exactly what you set out to do. Congrats. That was quite an accomplishment to destroy a first world G7 nation and bring both it and its people to their knees in just 10 years. I'm glad we could come to this more accurate understanding of each other. And now that I understand you fully, I would like to say that I hope that your fellow countrymen decide to hog-tie you, throw you in the back of a good old American pickup truck, and take you into the northernmost tip of your country, where they abandon you to a pack of hungry Arctic wolves. That way your life will at least serve one purpose, by nourishing an endangered species that I happen to love. Not that I'm encouraging anyone to actually do that. It's just fun to think about. I love doing my part to help along efforts at diplomacy. Another Canadian politician threatened to deny internet to his own people in order to retaliate against us by tearing up their province's Starlink contract.
Tomorrow, the LCBO, which sells nearly $1 billion worth of American beer, wine, spirits, and seltzers every year, will remove all U.S. products from its shelves and wholesale catalog. We've gone one step further. We'll be ripping up our contract with Elon Musk's Starlink. Ontario won't do business with people hell-bent on destroying our economy. Friends, there's no sugarcoating it. The coming days and weeks will be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, because of you. How does it hurt Americans for you to take products off your shelf that you've already paid for? Or to deny your people internet access? Well, like I've said before to the Canadian people, if you're in an abusive relationship with your own woke politicians and they're holding you hostage against your will, send up a flare and we'll send the Marines to save you. Unfortunately for this woke politician, he had to eat crow because only a couple of hours later, Trudeau completely caved. Only one day after announcing his retaliatory tariffs. Now he announced that he would indeed do everything that Trump wanted, and he appointed a fentanyl czar, listed the cartels as terrorist organizations, launched a joint strike force with the United States to combat organized crime, fentanyl trafficking, and money laundering, as well as deployed 10,000 personnel to the northern border. In exchange, Trump agreed to put Canada's tariffs on hold for 30 days, too, as he did for Mexico. China, on the other hand, has announced a retaliatory 15% import tax on American coal and liquid gas, and a 10% tariff on our crude oil, agricultural machinery, and certain vehicles. But because they do not make up much of our market for any of those products, especially compared to our other markets, that seems like a pretty ineffective strategy from the start. More importantly, China announced retaliatory export controls on certain metals that we buy from them, which are used for technology and defense. But since those materials are available for purchase elsewhere, once again, that particular blade does not have much sting. The former minister of Poland wrote a piece for the New York Times discussing the effects of Trump being back in office. He said that Europe has become acutely aware of where their priorities lie, and security is at the top of that list. Trump's insistence during his first term that NATO nations put at least 2% of their own GDP into their own defense resulted in action. At the start of Trump's first term, only 5 nations met that threshold. Last year, that number was 23 out of the 32 NATO nations. Now the bar has been raised again, and Trump is demanding that European nations raise their investment to 5% of their GDP because they can't afford it, and therefore they should prioritize their own defense rather than relying on us to pick up the slack if they don't. The Polish minister admitted that this was an ambitious goal, but given the security threats that Europe faces, he also admitted that this is a needed change in Europe. Poland already spends close to 5% of its GDP on its defense, which is the highest rate of any NATO country. They have used their investment to buy billions of dollars worth of military equipment from the United States since 2022. In the most foreign frontier that can technically qualify as foreign affairs. I didn't know where else to put this story, people. New images from Mars went viral this week, showing the apparent outline of a perfectly square structure on the surface of our neighboring planet. It is estimated to be 770 feet by 770 feet, which is approximately the same size as the Great Pyramid in Gaza, Egypt. Hey, Elon. Check that out for us, will you? Thank you. And speaking of Elon, the real fun this week was all happening when DOGE dominates. Elon has been keeping us up to date concerning the progress he has been making during his first 2 weeks running the new Department of Government Efficiency, including a list of more than 100 DEI-related contract cancellations that have resulted in more than $1 billion worth of savings right there. He also posted this, quote, reducing the federal deficit from $2 trillion to $1 trillion in fiscal year 2026 requires cutting an average of $4 billion a day in projected 2026 spending from now till September 30th. Musk said in his original post, quote, that would still result in a $1 trillion deficit, but economic growth should be able to match that number, which would mean no inflation in 2026. Super big deal. Adding, quote, I am cautiously optimistic that we will reach the $4 billion a day fiscal year 2026 reduction this weekend. Obviously, there will be extreme opposition from the grifters, and they will make it sound like we're cutting funding to save baby pandas when we're actually cutting funding to fraudsters, wastrels, and terrorists. Reuters reported that some of Musk's aides had locked government workers out of the computer system at the Office of Personnel Management. When asked if the report was true, and given a hats off to you if it is, Musk replied with a smiling, winking face emoji. The Daily Wire's DOGE reporter Luke Rosiak posted about Musk, saying that he had, quote, deleted huge swaths of code dedicated to virtue signaling rather than mission, such as its inclusion bot that lectured staff. Musk said in reply, the nightmare is over. Conservative activist Robbie Starbuck reported, quote, the highest-ranking Treasury official, David A. Liebrecht, is resigning rather than complying with a request by DOGE for access to audit, where they spent trillions of dollars a year. Starbuck wrote, quote, why would career bureaucrats fear an audit by Elon Musk and DOGE to see where we can save money? Musk said in response, quote, the DOGE team discovered, among other things, that payment approval officers at Treasury were instructed always to approve payments, even to known fraudulent or terrorist groups. They literally never denied a payment in their entire career, not even once. Concerning the wasteful spending for NGOs and excessive foreign aid, Musk posted, quote, live by the executive order, die by the executive order. Mutually assured destruction from now on, baby. Welcome to the New World Order. Libs of TikTok reported to Musk that certain government websites had not followed the executive orders issued to them to remove DEI directives and initiatives. Musk responded, DOGE will fix it. Ryan Peterson requested that Elon look into the U.S. Mint in San Francisco, which occupies an enormous block of prime commercial real estate, all in order to exclusively mint commemorative coins for collectors. Musk responded, noted. Another person suggested cutting federal government through a surprise, nationwide, mandatory drug test. Musk responded, great idea. Hey, a government where anyone can make suggestions directly to the people working for them, and if their contributions are useful, then they are actually taken seriously, no matter who they came from, instead of a bunch of aloof elites who are too good to talk to the riffraff being in charge and running everything as they stick the little guy with the consequences of their decisions. I like it. I love it. I want some more of it. Unlike other government employees, Musk works weekends, saying that it is a superpower to be on the field while the other team forfeits for 2 whole days. Musk later added, quote, DOGE is working 120 hours a week. Our bureaucratic opponents optimistically work 40 hours a week. That is why they are losing so fast. The results of all of this are that, quote, Decades of grifting and stealing are coming to an end. Finally, thank you, DOGE. A post which expressed the public sentiments throughout most of the nation. According to the Wall Street Journal, Musk and his allies are moving swiftly to exert control over vast swaths of the U.S. government. Musk oversaw a successful effort by his representatives to gain direct access to a payment system that distributes trillions of dollars to Americans every year. Individuals working for DOGE assessed the U.S. Agency for International Development, otherwise known as USAID, following a clash with security officials. This move marks the start of a far-reaching campaign by Musk to upend the federal government agency by agency, according to his allies. The effort prompted outrage from Democrats and even some Republicans who said that Musk doesn't have the authority to overturn programs and spending priorities decided by Congress, which is, unfortunately for them, not true, because the programs that they are talking about are part of the executive branch. And they are therefore subject only to the president, and they can be shut down at his sole discretion. So as long as Elon is doing what Trump wants, you can't stop him. So sad for you. Concerns were also raised over the nature of Musk's operation, because his position didn't require confirmations, but it is now operating within the government, not just assessing from the outside, which does appear to legally require Senate authorization. But we control the Senate. Musk has spent the week shutting down programs that are wildly inefficient. He reported that career Treasury officials were routinely making illegal payments. The Treasury Press Office has had no response to these accusations and requests for comment. On Saturday, when 8 DOGE representatives tried to gain access to classified systems and floors of the USAID building in downtown Washington, security officials initially resisted that request. The security officials were then put on leave for not complying. Once again, the Treasury Department, including USAID, is completely under the control and dominion of the executive branch, meaning the president. Oh no! And so, the president does have absolute authority to declassify any material there that Elon wants to see. The DOGE representatives were given access to the Nerve Center for Coordination and Communication for the agency's highest levels and the offices of its officials. USAID, which was founded by JFK, is a 10,000-person, $40 billion agency. It has given billions of dollars worth of aid to foreign organizations and non-governmental organizations, many of which are devoted solely to spreading left-wing ideologies abroad. Musk posted that USAID was, quote, a corrupt organization filled with Marxist staffers. It has been reported that USAID has spent $9.3 billion in aid to Islamist terrorist states that collectively are responsible for killing over 3,000 American soldiers.
As we dug into USAID, it became apparent that what we have here is not an apple with a worm in it, but we have actually just a bowl of worms. Mm-hmm. There is no apple. You've just got to basically get rid of the whole thing. It's beyond repair. So really none of this could be done without the full support of the president. I went over it with him, in detail, and he agreed with that we should shut it down. I actually checked with him a few times. Said, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yes." So we're shutting it down.
Shutting down USAID alone will save us between $40 and $50 billion. This organization also financed giving Cuba its own version of Twitter so that Cubans who were denied access by their government would have a social media platform at our expense. They, of course, kept this program a secret from both the Americans and the Cubans. In fact, they went to great lengths to hide their involvement in funding the platform behind several shell companies.
The U.S. has admitted to being behind a Twitter-style text messaging service in Cuba, but denies it was a covert operation to topple President Castro. The Associated Press news agency revealed that the U.S. aid agency funded Zunzuneo, claiming it aimed to stir unrest, something the White House refuted.
Congress funds democracy programming for Cuba to help empower Cubans to access more information and to strengthen civil society. These appropriations are public, unlike covert action. The money invested has been debated in Congress.
Yeah, shell companies aren't my idea of doing something out in the open, my dude. The money that went to Cuba for this purpose had been earmarked for an unspecified project in Pakistan. That's the congressional approval he's talking about, which is, of course, fraud, because Congress had approved the money for Pakistan. And the president had signed a bill that authorized sending the money to Pakistan. And then USAID just did whatever the hell they wanted with it, which is otherwise known as embezzlement. Democrats are complaining loudly because many of them have worked for USAID and were part of the wasteful self-enrichment program going on at the people's expense. USAID is also a big part of how they recruit new activists to join their party. Now their ability to benefit from giving away all of their handouts is being minimized. Ilhan Omar had this to rage.
A billionaire that hasn't been vetted, has not gone through confirmation, has not been elected by the American people,
Stop
who we
shrieking.
still do not understand what in the world he's doing, should not be telling American employees that they cannot access the building they work at. What kind of country is this man turning our country into? What kind of country are we becoming?
A transparent one?
It is embarrassing to read the headlines about
Free
America, where one man is walking around like he is the boss of all of us, and we don't know who put him in charge.
I can solve that mystery for you, sweetie. Trump put Elon in charge, and we, the American people, put Trump in charge. Hope that clears things up for you, Ilhan. If not, have your brother explain it to you. This is the executive domain, not the legislative's. So do your own job and stop caterwauling over losing your grift structures.
We will do all that we can in Congress, but we need you, America, to listen and to act, because today it's USAID. Tomorrow it's our health care. It's Social Security.
Good.
It's our livelihoods. It's our freedoms.
Audit it all.
So stand up for USA Today.
No.
USAID Today, so that we can stand up for all of our freedoms in the days
I
ahead.
don't think so.
Okay, first. So we will use every power that we have in our disposal in the United States Senate. My colleagues will do the same thing in the House. This is a constitutional crisis that we are in today. Let's call it what it is.
Please, let's.
The people get to decide how we defend the United States of America.
We
the
have.
People get to decide how their taxpayer money is
Yes,
spent.
we
Elon
do.
Musk does not get to decide.
Again.
Here was Chuck Schumer chiming in.
We also know this is just the beginning. If DOGE attacks USAID today, then you can be sure they'll move on to another target tomorrow.
You promise?
Who knows? Maybe it'll be the Postal Service.
Yeah!
The IRS. Or
Ooh.
the Social Security
Yeah.
Administration.
Oh.
They could be next. Or maybe our National Security Agency.
Yeah, you're getting it. Don't threaten me with a good time, baby, or I might start imitating Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally. After the initial firings, Mark Rubio was made the acting head of USAID.
I'm the acting director of USAID. I've delegated that authority to someone, but I stay in touch with him. And again, our goal was to go in and align our foreign aid to the national interest. But if you go to mission after mission and embassy after embassy around the world, you will often find that in many cases, USAID is involved in programs that run counter to what we're trying to do in our national strategy with that country or with that region. That cannot continue. USAID is not an independent, non-governmental entity. It is an entity that spends taxpayer dollars, and it needs to spend
He's a very talented guy from the standpoint of management and costs. Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval, and we'll give him the approval where appropriate. Where not appropriate, we won't. But he reports in, and it's something that he feels very strongly about, and I'm impressed because he's running, obviously, a big company. It has nothing to do with, there's a conflict that we won't let him get near it, but he does have a good natural instinct. He's got a team of very talented people. We're trying to shrink government, and he can probably shrink it as well as anybody else, if not better.
As of September 2024, USAID had already spent almost all of the $39 billion that it had allocated to Ukraine for non-military purposes. Most of it went to a fund to pay for the pensions and salaries of Ukraine's government bureaucrats. During the same time, the Defense Department was allocated $124 billion for Ukraine's military defenses, and they had only spent $49 billion of it by that point. So, can someone please explain to me how the pensions of foreign bureaucrats cost almost as much as a war does? USAID was also subsidizing the World Economic Forum, which we have withdrawn from.
And there are so many abuses of AID. I found out that AID has given money to support the World Economic Forum. Why would the United States taxpayer be subsidizing the World Economic Forum when everybody that arrives over there arrives in a Gulfstream G5?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's interesting how the Democrats always claim that it's conservatives who want to steal money from the poor and give to the rich, but it's always them who actually gets caught doing that very thing.
Karen, do you know if Mr. Musk took the same oath that you and other senior advisors to the president took about adhering to the Constitution, following the law? Do you know if he took that oath?
I don't know the answer to that question, but like I told Caitlin, I can get back to you guys on that.
And do you know what expertise he has in the areas of global health or humanitarian aid to be able to assess what's happening at USAID?
Well, first of all, Elon Musk is a once-in-a-generation business leader. He is an entrepreneur. He serves as a great ally and a friend to the president. And I think Elon Musk also has a little bit of common sense. And I think the American people really appreciate that when it comes to the federal government, because it seems like all common sense has been lost in this city. And that's what you see when you look at USAID. I know Secretary Rubio made some comments about how he will be acting as the director over that agency. And here's the reason why Elon Musk and others have been taking a look. Because if you look at the waste and abuse that has run through USAID over the past several years, these are some of the insane priorities that organization has been spending money on. $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap, and I know the American people don't either, and that's exactly what Elon Musk has been tasked by President Trump to do, to get the fraud, waste, and abuse out of our federal government.
USAID also spent $500,000 to expand atheism in Nepal, and $20,000 a pop for multiple drag shows in Ecuador. Many of the true humanitarian programs at USAID are already being preserved, but the Wall Street Journal added a report that the $40 billion budget of USAID went to things like supporting electric vehicles in Vietnam, a transgender clinic in India, an LGBTQ group in Serbia receives $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbian workplaces. The Middle East Forum did an analysis that says $164 million of USAID money went to support radical organizations around the globe. $122 million of that aid went to groups aligned with foreign terrorist organizations, including organizations directly controlled by Hamas, where the recipients of that money have openly called for their land to be cleansed of all Jews. Federal government employees spent more than $8 million in recent years on Politico Pro subscriptions, each of which cost 5 figures apiece. Oh, so that's why the media outlets have been panicking over the shutdown. They're being paid through the grift. They're part of it. No way that a subscription that cost $10,000 each could possibly be a grift, right? The Associated Press also has been getting several million dollars each year from the government. So has the New York Times, receiving several millions since 2021.
So upon coming out here to the briefing room, I was made aware of the funding from USAID to media outlets, including Politico, who I know has a seat in this room. And I can confirm that the more than $8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening. The DOGE team is working on canceling those payments now. Again, this is a whole-of-government effort to ensure that we are going line by line when it comes to the federal government's books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people? Is this a good use of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not, that funding will no longer be sent abroad, and American taxpayers will see significant savings because of that effort.
To correct what she said, it is not USAID money that is going to those subscriptions, but it is federal taxpayer subsidies. Congress is now looking into what has been going on over at USAID. This is Nancy Mace.
Today I'm going to expose some of the initiatives USAID has funded over the years and ask each of you a yes or no question. If you believe these expenditures of American taxpayer dollars put America first, so it'll be yes or no. USAID awarded $2 million to strengthen trans-led organizations to deliver gender-affirming health care in Guatemala. So to each of you this morning, does this advance the interests of American citizens paying for trannies in Guatemala to the tune of $2 million? Yes or no? Governor?
I have no position.
Of course you don't.
Liar, liar, pants on fire. You're all for it. Otherwise, we know what your answer would be. But you know that it's not in any way, shape, or form justifiable to the taxpayers. David Axelrod, a former Obama advisor, is the only sane voice on the left right now. He is warning that officials in the Democrat Party shouldn't sully themselves by trying to save USAID. He told Politico that his party is walking straight into a trap. And he's right. For Democrats to die on the hill of protecting an organization that is being exposed for so much corrupt spending while opposing the sentiments of the people who do not appreciate this betrayal of their trust is a very stupid electoral strategy going forward. Even the fact that DOGE will now be investigating Medicare fraud concerning the widespread practice of insurers adding diagnoses to the physician's report, even though the patient hasn't been treated by anyone for their diagnosis. And they have pocketed $50 billion from Medicare just via this method. So having them looked at doesn't bother me so much, even as someone who is entirely dependent on Medicare in order to survive. Considering that I continue to hear about things like the fact that $20 million came out of our pockets for a Sesame Street program in Iraq. $8 million of our money was spent to teach Sri Lankan journalists how to avoid binary gendered language. $2 million was spent to fund sex changes in Guatemala. Another $2 million to help the BBC, of all things, value the diversity of Libyan society. We also spent another $40 million on AIDS drugs for transgender prostitutes in South Africa. Then there was the $8 million we spent to study the effects of flavored cigarettes on bisexuals and lesbians, as though it would affect them differently than it does anybody else, and as though anybody would care about this kind of stupid shit either way. Then we spent around $100 million to combat HIV in Ukraine, $27 million to the George Soros Prosecution Fund. Yeah, because that's someone who doesn't have enough money of his own to fund his awful agendas and therefore desperately needs to pick my pocket too. Who takes from the poor to give to the rich again? $2 million for pottery classes in Morocco, $11 million to encourage Vietnam to stop burning their trash, $27 million for gift bags for illegal aliens, $330 million to help Afghanis grow crops. Crops of what? Food or poppies? Just so I know. That was the Sackler family's idea, right? $200 million was spent on an unused Afghani dam. Another $250 million was spent on an unused Afghani road. Several hundreds of millions of dollars each month was spent to ship illegals into the country. Shall I go on? And that's just the things that you've admitted to spending my hard-earned money on with a straight face as though you're shocked that I would object to any of it. I hate to break it to you, but you are all out of your rabbit-ass minds. Those are not top priorities for me, or for most of the people out there. And having broken my trust to this degree, why should I believe you that you haven't done even worse things than this? Because this is just what you've been caught doing after 20 days of looking into it. Just exactly how many flavored cigarettes does $8 million buy for your bisexual lesbian study? And where did the rest of that money actually go? Because I don't believe that you could spend that much money on a study like that if you tried. Facing a tsunami of actual progress, the libs are resorting to the only tactic that is left to them in a world where things are happening too fast for them to have the time to make up a false narrative about it. 17 days into the new administration, they have begun to talk about impeachment. All those lovers of democracy who are trying to overturn the will of the people who have spoken via the ballot box, led by Al Green of Texas, who announced his plan to introduce the articles of impeachment.
Ethnic cleansing has been a crime against humanity. And I stand here today in the well to denounce what was said, to denounce what the president said. I rise to announce that the movement to impeach the president has begun. I rise to announce that I will bring articles of impeachment against the president for dastardly deeds proposed and dastardly deeds done.
So, are you a used car salesman? A preacher selling a holy water scheme? Or are you trying to sell me Amway products? Or are you a politician? I can't tell anymore. You don't have the votes to get it done. So put on your show. The theater's empty, dude. Does the left have any backup strategies besides this? Yes, they do. Chanting in protest. Here is Chuck Schumer.
I am going to stand with you in this fight, and we will win. 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 We won't rest. We won't rest. We won't rest. We won't rest. Thank you, everybody.
So now you aren't even effective at doing the one thing you actually do? Pointlessly chanting meaningless slogans? I mean, everyone's just standing there looking at you in confusion and wondering if that's the same chant that you picked up from nap time at your retirement home, Chuck. I hate the days when some unwise junior staffer makes the mistake of passing out Red Bulls in the geriatric wing of Congress in an attempt to make us think that they're still alive and only mildly senile. Speaker Mike Johnson summed it up.
The president is doing exactly what he said on the campaign trail that he is going to do, would do. And he's delivering on that, and we're a big part of that, and we're going to do it as well. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party truly is seemingly lost. They have no rudder, they have no vision, they have no clear leader. The only message they have is anti-President Trump, and we've all seen that that's a failed strategy time after time.
Democrats used excessive executive power to build themselves a behemoth parasitic structure, and now Republicans are using those same powers to take a massive chainsaw to it all and cut out all of the waste. You break it, you buy it. We are all going to play by the same rules from now on. Mutually assured destruction, baby. I'd prefer to curb the executive powers back into proportional equality with the other two branches of government. But this is your unchecked system. You built it, but you aren't driving it anymore. Once things are fixed, maybe you'll be willing to have everyone go back to playing by the old rules. But if not, then everybody is playing by the new ones, not just you. A very pro-China account on Twitter was celebratory about the opportunities that this vacuum of cutting USAID will create with the cessation of aid and the opportunities that could create for China to fill that vacuum, saying that USAID was not really a humanitarian agency, but rather a covert intelligence agency funding protest coups and regime changes. Specifically, they objected to USAID's opposition to the Cuban regime, the Venezuelan regime, the Bolivian regime, and the Taliban in Afghanistan. So basically, they are very upset that for all of the other bad things that USAID did, they weren't also fans of communism and fascism and tyrannies on top of everything else. Yeah, that's just you, dude. Babylon Bee ran a headline mocking all of the leftist rage concerning the cuts, saying, "First fascist in history to cut the size of his government." Here's Hakeem Jeffries making their point.
They've done nothing as it relates to lowering the high cost of living. At the same time, they are raiding the government, attempting to steal taxpayer money.
Not spending it, stealing
That's what the situation at the Treasury Department is all about.
Well.
We will introduce the Stop the Steal Act in short order to prevent unlawful access with respect to the Department of Treasury's payment system connected to people who are trying to steal personal, sensitive, and confidential information.
Do you need a minute to get your lies straight? You seem to be struggling there, and no one believes you. And here's Chuck Schumer one more time.
The American people will not stand for an unelected, secret group to run rampant through the executive branch.
They're posting everything they do.
Being innovative is good. But, Mr. Musk, this isn't a tech startup. These are public institutions that deal with things like Social Security and Medicare and national defense.
Successful?
And provide for the well-being of the American people. And the American people have a right to be part of that debate.
Profitable? None of those things? You're right, we do have a right to be part of the debate. We love it. Which is why we voted for this. Congresswoman Stewardess Barbie took to social media to caterwaul as well.
This dude
is probably one of the most unintelligent billionaires I've ever met or seen or witnessed. Which, you know, you could probably even glean that from watching.
Could you be blushing and more turned on right now?
Anyways, all of that is to say is that they don't do their homework. Clearly, like, they're putting 19-year-olds in at the Treasury. This dude is not smart. And the danger in the lack of intelligence and the lack of expertise that
Pot kettle
has. I mean, this guy is one of the most morally vacant, but also
pot kettle.
Just least knowledgeable of these systems that we really know of. But the point is that what that means is that they're going to hit a button inevitably.
They're going to hit a
they
button?
are going to hit a button.
A button?
And things can go sideways.
Oh. Okay, so are you talking about the 19-year-old world-class decoder who used AI to decrypt a 2,000-year-old Greek text that was no longer legible? Something that no one else has been able to do? That 19-year-old? Who didn't do their homework, bartender? But hey, everyone is entitled to make one mistake. So let's review AOC's record.
But of course, the dynamic there in terms of geopolitics and the war in the Middle East is very different than people expressing their First Amendment right to protest.
Well, yes, but I also think that what people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of Palestine, is just an increasing crisis of humanitarian condition. And that to me is just where I tend to come from on this issue.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing.
There are no settlements in Gaza.
And places where
you're thinking of the West Bank, sweetheart.
Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing.
What the hell are you talking about?
Do you think you can expound on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also just, I am not the expert on geopolitics.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, the guy that invented Neuralink, PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla, Starlink. He's got nothing on you. You just want to be in charge of a war that you think is about lack of access to housing.
Is it your testimony today that you personally witnessed President Joe Biden commit a crime?
I believe the fact that he was sitting with me while I was putting together a
Did
business
you
deal.
witness the president commit a crime? Is it your testimony today?
Yes.
And what crime have you witnessed?
How much time do I have to go through it?
It is simple. You name the crime. Did you watch him steal something?
Corruption statutes, RICO, and conspiracy.
What is the crime?
RICO. You just said.
Specifically.
You asked me to answer the question. I answered the question.
No.
RICO, you're obviously not familiar with. Corruption statutes.
Excuse me, sir. RICO is not a crime. It is a category
of crimes.
It's a category of crimes that you're then charged.
You have charges.
A long 100.
You have charges. Sir, please name
the exact statute under RICO?
Yes.
Well, it's funny. In this committee room, everyone's not here. There's over 8 lawyers that went to law school.
Yeah, I would too, because you're making yourself look like you thought when he said RICO, he was talking about the villain from Crocodile Dundee 2.
What I'm saying, this is not the only paper where we've given the Secretary numerous options to secure the border and save lives.
And so the recommendation, of the many that you recommended family separation.
I recommended zero tolerance.
Which includes family separation.
The same as is when every U.S. citizen parent gets arrested with a child.
Mm-hmm.
zero tolerance was interpreted as the policy that separated children from their
If I get arrested for DUI and I have a young child in the car, I'm going to be separated. When I was a police officer in New York and I arrested a father for domestic violence, I separated that father
Mr.
from his
Holman, with
family.
all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you're
If
in
they
the
came in
country,
legally.
it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum and go through the port of entry, do it the legal way. The Attorney General of the United States has made that clear.
Okay.
Now, AOC may not have invented Neuralink, which, lets paralyzed people control a computer and have access to the world, but she did have these bright ideas to offer.
We can put so many people to work. We need to refit so many pipes. We need to relay roads. We need to rebuild schools. We need to invent technology that's never even been invented yet.
Invent technology that's never been invented yet? As opposed to inventing things that have already been invented? Wow. If only we could think as outside the box as you, sweetie. Then one day we might be ready for kindergarten too, like you. AOC also vowed to block any progress of any kind and made a plea for us to help her, which is being mocked. But in fairness, people, if she was capable of being anything, an obstructionist is probably about the best that she can hope for. But my money's on the probability that she's not even good for that. But hey, if that's how she'd like to be remembered, the person standing in the way of what the people want, for her own personal petty reasons, you got it, girlfriend.
The Trump administration is currently trying to get their nominees approved and voted on. No Democrat should be voting to advance Trump's nominees while all of this stuff is going on. There has to be a political price to pay, and we have a responsibility as a party to block everything that is happening while they're setting a literal match to the federal government and giving 19-year-olds classified access, potentially classified access to the U.S. Treasury Department. So we need to start blocking every single procedural advancement on the Senate side in order to do that.
Yeah, that'll make you popular. But AOC wasn't done making contributions. Yes, the Congresswoman of 3 names and only 2 IQ points also advised people on how best to resist deportations.
Principle number 1 in what you can do is that when one of these things comes to your backyard, you can resist. And what that happens over millions of people is that you generate enough friction that they cannot go as fast as they want to go. Okay? So I'm going to give you some examples that have already been working.
Okay, great.
Let's start with immigration and ICE. When people say, what can we do? In my community, we are a heavily immigrant community. ICE raids deeply affect and disrupt our community.
Okay,
so,
move on to the examples.
Number 1, if you live in a community with a lot of immigrants, know your rights. That's one tangible thing you can do that I want you to do.
That's not a specific.
And that means know your rights if you are a U.S. citizen as well. Okay?
Get the
Here's
examples.
one way that we're going to create some friction in this system. Tom Homan, who's directing a lot of these ICE operations nationally, etc., he went on TV practically crying. This dude was whining his ass off because ICE went into the city of Chicago, and Chicago had prepared for them.
Okay, how?
Community organizers, activists, and their mayor and local elected officials who were solid on this issue, they educated the city on their legal rights.
Which were?
Because what ICE tries to do is that they rely on people not knowing their rights in order to enter buildings.
Okay, so tell us the rights.
Workplaces, etc. So when you know your rights, you are able to tell
Explain them to me.
And they do walk away. What you can do is protect people around you.
How?
And also make sure that you are slowing down this system. The slower they operate, the less they can break.
Okay, Airhead. Hiding illegal fugitives is a felony. Impeding ICE is also a felony. So listen to her at your own risk, because you're the ones who will end up in Bubba's cell, not her. Consider how much you believe she really knows concerning the things that she's talking about when she tells you to know your rights, but she can't give you the specifics about what those rights actually are and what they aren't. So yeah, be Charlie Brown at Lucy's psychiatry stand. Take your legal advice from a failed bartender addicted to making TikTok videos to immortalize every spare moment of her inane life and every airhead thought that pops into her empty brain at your own risk. As for AOC herself, one day, sweetheart, your 2 IQ points are going to cause you to accidentally cross the line, and on that day, just know that there will be a lot of glee out there as we watch you get shoved into an orange jumpsuit and tossed into federal prison. Orange is the new black, I hear. Jasmine Crockett, still fishing for a promotion in order to move up to the A team of the squad, is still at it and had this criticism to offer.
President Trump is appointing Darren Beattie to a top State Department role. Many people remember who Darren Beattie is. He was fired in 2018 for being a speechwriter. He was speaking at a conference attended by white nationalists. And then a few months ago, he posted this, Congresswoman: competent white men must be in charge if you want things to work. Unfortunately, our entire national ideology is predicated on coddling the feelings of women and minorities and demoralizing competent white men. Your reaction to his appointment?
He needs to go. I mean, this is very simple. We right now have a white supremacist that is sitting in the White House. He is backed up by other white supremacists. I am tired of the white tears. Listen, if you are competent, you are not concerned. When I walk into Congress every single day, you know why I don't feel away and why you can't make me doubt who I am?
Feel away?
Because I know that I had to work 10 times as hard as they did just to get into the seat. When you look and you compare me to Marjorie Taylor Greene or me to Lauren Boebert, there is no comparison.
No comparison.
This is the life that we have always lived. So the only people that are crying are the mediocre white boys that have been beaten out by people that historically have had to work so much harder.
Feel away? Is that like drift away? Give me the big boys to free my soul. Wanna get lost in your rock and roll and feel away. No, the original was better. Better luck next time finding words that have a coherent meaning when strung together, B-team. And by the way, say all of it to the mirror. If you're qualified, you're still going to get in, so the only people who are crying are those who are unqualified and losing their free rides. And I might as well just end my podcast career here and now by saying the unsayable thing that everyone out there of all races is thinking right now, Jasmine. However sick you are of the white tears, I'm equally sick of the minority tears of race hustlers like you who put down other people of color, who step up and work hard, calling them white supremacists for not wanting to be treated differently. People who want to succeed on their own merits and not be anybody else's charity case, because unlike you, they can. Those people are good enough human beings to not want anyone of any color, not just their own, to be discriminated against for their sake, because people like that are perfectly capable of standing on their own 2 feet and succeeding. Now, back to the A team of the squad. Ilhan Omar advised people that she has publicly stated are her priority, meaning Somalians, who are here illegally, on ways that they could avoid deportation. This is a clip of Ben Shapiro reading the translation since she chose to speak in Somalian.
She's speaking Somali. She says, I advise the Somalian people that if ICE attempts to question you, they're not obligated to answer their questions. Just say that you were advised by a lawyer not to answer a question. Disclosure of your name, immigration status, mode of entry is not mandatory. Learn the laws and prepare yourself, she says, about illegal immigrants. And refrain from disclosing information you would prefer them not to know.
Do you understand what the penalty for treason is, Ms. Omar? Because this isn't the first time that you've gotten within spitting distance of it. Cross that line, and that little act of defiance will end with a short drop that has a sudden stop, girlie. Just saying. The freakout over the age of people working under Musk at DOGE was effectively blown to pieces by Charlie Cook, the editor of the National Review, when he pointed out that exceptional young people are kind of a staple in the tech world. Page and Brin created Google at 24. Zuckerberg launched Facebook at 19. Steve Jobs started Apple at 21. If these young people were on the left, they would all be praising them and singing, I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Like they did for the queen of the useless people and high school dropout Greta Thunberg, who isn't a kid anymore, but she still is completely useless. And since the Democratic Party right now has no future, they have nothing to resort to other than pearl clutching. So forgive me if I don't value your judgment concerning your ability to evaluate quality young people. Starring in the lead role of the pearl clutching performance was Joy Reid, who was so offended to find out that this 19-year-old tech genius at DOGE had once used the handle online of BigBalls. And she wouldn't even say the word balls on air, but she spelled it out B-A-L-L-S while apologizing for her vulgarity in spelling. Clearly forgetting the many times that she has said far more vulgar words than a first grader uses. Very convincing performances. I'll await the announcement of the Oscar nomination with bated breath, sweetie. So, you really think that I'm going to stop looking over here at all of the waste that is so insane that we actually need a new word for what you've been doing in order to now look over here and clutch my smelling salts in hysteria over a humorous social media handle? Well, I'm normal, so not so much. I would like to point out that after digging desperately, that was the best they could find on the kid. The handle BigBalls. And that he has already founded several companies starting at the age of 16. A serious crime, as we all know. And if you were even saying, oh my gosh, all of this wasteful spending is shocking and completely unacceptable, but let's not get carried away, and let's remain calm and not jump to any conclusions. Let's be neutral and skeptical so that we don't do anything rash. Then I could at least believe that you were trying to be balanced and were motivated by what was best for the people. But when you don't have a word to say about the actual story, which is the shocking waste that has been uncovered, and instead you pretend that the story is a social media handle? Then I can't even pretend to believe that you are anywhere near the planet of honestly trying to fulfill your duties as an actual journalist. And therefore, I will treat your reporting with about as much seriousness as you are treating your responsibilities. So here's what I have to say. Well, if BigBalls is going to save me money, then all I can say is, BigBalls, I salute you. And by the way, I salute your excellent trolling as well. This is the best long-term endgame that I've ever seen in the trolling world. By setting up this handle knowing that one day it would be found and provoke this amusing reaction, and that the rest of us would now get to watch and enjoy. Well done, lad. And as for the protests over unelected bureaucrats having access to our private information and the fear-mongering that you're trying to generate over that, your unelected bureaucrats weren't elected, and you hired them to work in these organizations where they have had access to our information for years, the people whose jobs you're trying to save. So why is that suddenly dangerous now that someone who is at least going to save me money in exchange has access? I don't understand why the unelected bureaucrats who are trying to find a way to spend my money on woke bullshit shouldn't concern me, but the unelected bureaucrat trying to stop them from spending my money on woke bullshit should scare the hell out of me. After rumors that Musk has begun looking into the FAA, Democrats had this to offer.
I'm sending a letter to Secretary Duffy. It's a clear conflict of interest, and Secretary Duffy should make sure that Mr. Musk is not part of the FAA air transportation system. What we don't welcome is a man who's regulated by this sector and who has had fines for violation of safety, which is launch issues related to protecting the flying public at a time when you need the FAA to call the shots and say, don't launch now because there could be a conflict in the airspace. The last thing I want is that guy trying to control the airspace.
You mean the guy who basically single-handedly restarted the space program? Saved our stranded astronauts from the International Space Station where you got them stuck? And who built a tower to catch a 20-story rocket out of midair? Yeah, that is definitely not the person you want in charge of the airspace and the aviation sector, which has been doing so well before this point. So much so that last year there were more than 500 severe close calls, according to the FAA, which coincidentally just killed a bunch of people in a crash, I seem to recall. You know who didn't have 500 serious close calls and kill a bunch of people? SpaceX. So is it just you that sees things this way? Yes, it really is.
Would you be okay if Democrats were doing this? If, for example, George Soros came in under a Democratic administration and had his staffers gain access to sensitive programs about Americans and their personal information and dismantling agencies, would you be okay with that?
It's amazing that Democrats are acting as if this is something that's novel. I've been talking to my constituents for months and months and months about Elon Musk coming in, having a serious business person coming in, and using his team to go through the federal budget with a fine-tooth comb.
Would you be okay if Democrats did this? If a George Soros came in with his staffers and did the same thing that Elon Musk is doing? Would you accept that?
Well, what's unprecedented is spending our taxpayer dollars on left-wing partisan political projects all over the globe.
Would I be okay with Democrats doing exactly what they did, which was to basically give George Soros complete control of everything? They just didn't do it out in the open? Yeah, if this is how the game's going to be played, I'd at least like to know what's being done and have some transparency about it. The Treasury Secretary explained.
When you say the DOGE team, these are Treasury employees. 2 Treasury employees, one of whom I personally interviewed in his final round. There is no tinkering with the system. They are on read-only. They are looking. They can make no changes. It is an operational program to suggest improvements. So we make 1.3 billion payments a year, and this is 2 employees who are working with a group of long-standing employees.
And when it comes to the idea of these tech geniuses being involved in cleaning house, what exactly is supposed to scare me about some of the brightest technological minds in the world being plugged into things like the transportation system and updating it so that it runs more efficiently and safely? That's the hill you want to die on by hysterically opposing non-events. Trump's plans to reduce the staff at USAID from 10,000 people to 290 is entirely appropriate under the circumstances. 3 cheers for that. Small government has to actually do their real jobs, and that doesn't leave them with a lot of extra time for this sort of criminal, wasteful nonsense. Here is the elected official of Wyoming.
$5 million to EcoHealth Alliance, one of the key NGOs, non-government organizations, funding bat virus research at the Wuhan lab.
Ooh, great one.
$20 million for a group related, by the way, to a key player in the Russiagate impeachment hoax. $1.5 million to rebuild the Cuban media ecosystem. $1.5 million on DEI programs in Serbia.
And can someone explain to me why the BBC, international charity, received millions and millions of dollars of American taxpayer money? Our obligations to Britain ended about 250 years ago. We fought a revolution to ensure that. Britain is not exactly a third world country, although it is well on its way to becoming one. Britain can fund its own woke nonsense, thank you very much. The BBC especially. We're funding enough of our own nonsense right now. In 2016, USAID also gave $310 million of my money to a Palestinian cement factory. That's a lot of cement. I wonder what the Palestinians needed that much cement for. Could it possibly be a terror tunnel system that is larger than the entire London metro? So congrats, you funded everything that led up to this war and all of the people who died in it. Not Israel, you! So that meme that shows the Iron Dome with the words funded by American tax dollars and the rockets being fired at the dome with the words somehow also funded by the American tax dollars, and the tunnels under Gaza that say somehow also funded by the American tax dollars is actually true. And you wonder why we're all fed up with you. Yeah, that is a real mystery. But you know what? If you want to die on this hill and think that the American people are going to come and fight beside you in order to keep this kind of waste alive by opposing these cuts, good luck to you. Because the only people who are still doing that are the Stepford morons left in your party who function not based off of intelligence, but off of a religious devotion to your cause and their zealous hysteria. And the days of those people being left in charge of things are over, because the rest of us have woken the hell up.
This is devastating, and it is ceding the field as well to the People's Republic of China, to the Russian Federation, and other malign actors who would like nothing more than to see the U.S. ground game in American foreign policy, the face of American values, disappear like this.
Do you think this is a victory for dictators, autocratic regimes around the world who are competing with the U.S. in Africa, in South America, all around the world for influence?
Well, it's not even an opinion. They are out relishing this moment and celebrating it.
I guess you should have thought of that before you turned USAID into some sort of woke embezzlement firm for waste that truly does need a new word to describe it, because insane just does not cut it. And by the way, American Values isn't funding a trans comic book in South America. That's the problem. If they want a trans comic book in South America, that is their business. But I have real things going on in my life, and I have no interest in funding someone else's ideology. Those may be your values, sweetheart. But if so, they are yours and yours alone. Joe Rogan pretty much speaks for the normies who won the last election when he said,
you're seeing a politician, a president who's coming in who can't get reelected, so he's just going ham. And he's just cleaning out everything. And people are freaking out. The same people that say we need radical change. Right. We need radical change. We've got corruption. We need radical change. Okay, well, here's your radical change. We don't need this. But you do. Yeah. The government does. They need oversight. Yeah, and they haven't had that. And because of that, you're seeing this not just waste. You could call it waste, but it's deeper. It's deeper than waste. It's corruption. And you're seeing that corruption get weeded out. I am hoping that this is successful and that it yields a benefit to the American people, to the working class people, to everybody, where they recognize, like, hey, we can't just be spending all our tax money on nonsense.
Yeah, it's worse even than corruption. It's just downright malicious, malignant elitism that thinks that they have the right to do this sort of stuff. Independent government agencies under United States Digital Services created by Obama in 2014 have also been exposed for hiring not only trans activists, but even people employed by porn websites, and they created a job for a, quote, kink-aware professional on their staff, sending an entire panel of lesbians to multiple DEI conferences and hiring gender studies majors whose entire job seems to consist of sending emails to lecture politicians on white cis privilege and toxic masculinity. Your gravy train is over, so you better get used to it, because we're going to be paying a lot more attention from now on until our dying day. Tom Coburn's website, usaspending.gov, is finally getting the traffic from the American people that it always should have. It's a shame that he isn't here to see it, but it will become his legacy to us. We're permanently tired of you spending our money on stuff that you would never spend your own money on, which is the definition of a grift. So from now on, you want this bullshit? Then you fund it with your money, Soros, because you aren't ever going to be allowed anywhere near a dime of ours ever again while we have any say about it. There's a lot of completely valid, righteous indignation out there right now, and it's coupled with optimism that has replaced the pessimism that has always told us that no one will ever be able to change this. We can, and we are, so help or shove off. Elsewhere, 2,000 workers have already taken the president up on his buyout offer, which is 1% of the federal workforce. The White House's goal is 5 to 10%. The offer was good through Thursday. The audits and non-voluntary cuts will follow next. The new Treasury Secretary ordered a freeze for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, meaning Elizabeth Warren's private kingdom that she used to abuse power so blatantly under the Biden administration has just lost its power, and hopefully its funding will follow close behind if Ted Cruz keeps his promise to advance that proposition concerning that. Elizabeth Warren is vowing to fight this, but because she deliberately set up her organization outside of all of the checks and balances of power so that she could have a complete control of a dictator, now the institution that she built to be her legacy is going to die by the very same rules that she used to create it, and there won't be anything she can do about it. And speaking of the days ahead for the Democrats, let us turn to the Democrats' party of doom. Any hope that the DNC would moderate and give us a viable choice once again has officially come to an end. Okay, Vance it is. They chose a new chair for the DNC, another fringe radical who worked under Tim Walz as opposed to a moderate. The new leader delusionally claimed that the Democrat Party is doing fine and doesn't need to make any changes or to moderate. He admitted that they lost a lot of Latino votes during the last election, and that they lost a lot of young people, and even a lot of women, and huge amounts of the working class. But according to him, the reasons for that remain completely unknown. Okay, maybe you might want to consider that it could be stuff like this from your committee.
Rules specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 offices must be gender balanced. With the results of the previous 4 elections, our elected officers are currently 2 male and 2 female. In order to be gender balanced, we must elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender. So again, this is what we have to do for this vice chair race. We have to elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender. To ensure our process accounts for male, female, and non-binary candidates, we conferred with our RBC co-chair, our LGBT caucus co-chair, and others to ensure that the process is inclusive and meets the gender balance requirements in our rules. To do this, our process will be slightly different than the one outlined to you earlier this week.
Maybe focus less on getting whatever decoder ring you need to have in order to make your next chart, and go back to doing your actual job, which is to offer a route for improving the lives of average Americans. Just a thought. A little unorthodox, I know. This is the non-binary person they were talking about.
My name is Troy Blackwell. I know that I'm a new face to many of you, but I'm a proud Afro-Latino from the South Bronx, New York. I got into this work because at the age of 18, unfortunately, I was the victim of a hate crime. Today I stand before you as one of the first non-binary candidates to run in the DNC's 177-year history.
Because it wasn't invented until 5 minutes ago?
I'm proud to be the only Afro-Latino in this race. I'm asking you to take a chance on someone like me, a proud non-binary Afro-Latino from the South Bronx. The final tally of votes, Troy Blackwell, 0.
Other candidates that were considered to chair the DNC include...
Hello, Democrats. Hey, I am speaking, and I would love your attention. There is a black woman at this podium, and I deserve your attention like the 11 people who went before me. Yes, I am speaking.
Good evening, Democrats. Look up here. 3 strong black women standing before you. 3 black women who, rather than just grabbing a chair, ran for chair.
We are sick and tired of being the last one hired and the first one fired. We are sick and tired of the...
Yes, we peasants all exist to pay attention to your narcissism and judge you based off the color of your skin as you dictate to us, which you say is the reason why you are above us and we owe you our allegiance. Did you forget to say, let them eat cake, or did you already eat it? Here was another candidate
will begin with the opening statements. Each candidate will have 30 seconds, and we'll start with Dr. Quintessa Hathaway.
Good evening, everyone. It is my desire to be the next DNC chair, and I just want to give you all a little bit of something that's been on my heart here over the last couple of days. You fight on, you fight on, you fight on, you fight on.
What are you doing?
When your government is doing you wrong, you fight on, oh, you fight on.
Thank you, Dr. Hathaway.
Okay, I'm just going to say here and now that these performative theater kids need to be barred from holding any public office, because we need some serious people in there so that the rest of us can lead our lives and not have to care so much about watching every single detail of the nuts and bolts of the running of the country the way that everyone has to these days. And no, she wasn't done.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome.
So the new plan is to try to turn the real world into a musical where human beings actually do randomly burst out into song? No. You're not the one out of touch. That will definitely appeal to the mainstream. Keep it up. Be you. By the way, the whole event started off with our very own land acknowledgement.
Ja, det er siffror. 토기의 리니에 있으네. 또 로카지가도 토지사에 있으나 샤. 코 그치 이스클리지 비케야. 나 코스튼 몰리하기 에바 아헤 다니즈. Welcome. The Democratic National Committee wishes to acknowledge that we gather together to state our values on lands that have been stewarded through many centuries by the ancestors and the descendants of tribal nations who have been here since time immemorial. We honor the communities native to this continent and recognize that our country was built on indigenous lands and hope.
So glad those are catching on. Oh, wait. They're not. So you're just going to double down on everything. You know what? I fully support that choice. Yes. Keep this up. This exact thing. The new vice chair is a defund the police activist who said at the time to ignore all the polls on that issue and keep forcing leftist ideology onto everyone else until you've changed the minds of all the people who don't know what's good for them. He also said that the NRA should be designated a terrorist organization. After careful consideration, I've decided to quote Jason Aldean. I got a gun that my granddad gave me. They say one day they're going to round up. Well, that shit might fly in the city. Good luck. Try that in a small town and see how far you make it down the road. This guy also claimed that he was a superior human being of admirable virtue for not having kids in favor of getting a sports car and 2 hybrid dogs. He believes that Abraham Lincoln does not qualify as a good president, and he declared himself to be, and I quote, one of the most politically toxic people in the country. Any politician doing anything with me is, in effect, committing political suicide, end quote. He had previously said that he would not run for office because there are already too many straight white men in power. And this is the guy who Democrats are championing as their big post-Walls hope of bringing young men back to the DNC's edible embrace. This is another amazing choice, guys.
You Democrats!
In the words of Beyonce, America has a problem, but Democrats, we're about to fix it. God bless you. Thank you so much. Let's get to work.
They don't sound very enthused.
David Hogg.
Oh, let's struggle for an applause.
First of all, thank you, Chairman Harrison. Can we give a round of applause to Jamie? Thank you. Who's ready to take the fight to the Republicans and win this thing? Are you guys ready to fight? It's been a long day, but guess what? We have a long road ahead. Let's go and kick some ass.
Your best efforts, and you could get a cheer that lasted about half a second. Maybe your party still needs some tweaking. No, not twerking. Tweaking. The fallout and the infighting over these choices began as soon as the public started reacting to these stellar decisions. So, yes, laugh at what the Democrat Party has unfortunately become and the kind of people that are still left to them now, but also resolve to become absolutely determined that they will never be given an ounce of power ever again until they have completely purged their party of these dangerous and destructive ideas and people. And until they finally hear us, the people, on that non-negotiable demand, let them know that we will not even consider them as a serious, viable option at all. Or they can just become completely irrelevant going forward if they would prefer that. And I guess we'll have to choose a new second party to be the sane counterweight of our society. Because right now, the latest polls show that the Democrats are sinking faster than the Titanic, with a popularity rating for the Democrat Party now at just 31%. Numbers don't lie. Keep blaming us for your problems and see if that makes your numbers go back up. I'm sure it will work if you give it more time. Which brings us to a new category, gender enders. Speaking of lost causes, concerning last week's executive order to pull federal funding from hospitals that perform trans procedures on minors, in response, New York's corrupt Attorney General Letitia James announced that she would use the powers of her office to go after any hospital that does not provide trans procedures for minors. She issued a warning to local hospitals that complying with the order from the White House could violate state law for which she will prosecute them, which is in keeping with the way that she obtained her office, which was by promising to find a way to prosecute Trump. This is what happens when you create a Frankenstein and then put it in charge of you. It shoves you between a rock and a hard place and then beats the shit out of you. James claimed that complying with this federal executive order would violate discrimination statutes by singling out a protected class, which is blatantly untrue because these procedures are not just banned for trans people. They are also banned for anyone who is underage and who does not have a physical condition that requires these drugs in treatment. Therefore, there is no discrimination. Hundreds of protesters, and only hundreds of protesters in a city of millions, including the Democratic Socialists of America, showed up to support the Attorney General in an attempt to shame the hospital for trying to comply with the federal executive orders. Cynthia Nixon gave a speech talking about her daughter, who is trans, her niece, who is also trans, her best friend's child, who is also trans, and her daughter's friend, who is, yep, you guessed it, also trans. But there is no social contagion here, people. It is entirely coincidence that these clusters exist primarily within liberal circles. Nothing to see here. Definitely not Munchausen's by proxy. Here's a bit of that protest.
Shut this entire city down!
Yeah, they failed to shut it down.
Not on our watch. Because what they will try to do, they will try to separate us. They will kick the trans people off the bus.
What?
They're kicking the indigenous people off the bus.
What?
They're kicking our intersex community off the bus.
Where?
Sphere Plus family, they're kicking them off the bus.
They just want a membership LGBT bus. Well, guess what, babe? That LGBT bus is not going to have any gas. It won't have any tires. Y'all not going any far. Because we are a community that is made and has been woven with the fire and the spirit of revolution. Revolution! Revolution!
What now?
So the people that are not here with us, we will take note. It's not that cold.
Yeah, the cold isn't why no one's there. And for the record, no one's being kicked off the bus. Men can still wear dresses. You just aren't allowed to sterilize and castrate vulnerable children in some Mengele-like Frankenstein experiment anymore. Is that really so bad? So ride whatever bus you want to. But in a couple of more years, no one will even admit that they ever supported these atrocities. No one. The writing is on the wall, so I advise you to learn to read.
Most importantly, I am here today as the mother of a proud trans man. I am here today as the aunt of a proud trans man. My best friend's kid is trans, and my kid's best friend is trans. My wife and I, our lives are filled with the most amazing, beautiful, brave, trans people, young and old, but especially young. My trans kid had his top surgery at NYU a number of years ago.
Yes, especially the young and impressionable people. Duly noted. Another executive order was issued barring biological men and boys who identify as trans from participating in women's school sports. The order is entitled Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports, and it enforces Title IX's original intentions of protecting biological women and their protected separate spaces.
In a few moments, I'll sign a historic executive order to ban men from competing in women's sports. It's about time. My administration will not stand by and watch men beat and batter female athletes. From now on, women's sports will be only for women. In recent years, the radical left has waged an all-out campaign to erase the very concept of biological sex and replace it with a militant transgender ideology. We're honored to be joined today by many incredible advocates for women's sports, including the brave swimmer at the forefront of this battle. And Riley Gaines is a person that I've been watching in my action this afternoon. We're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice that if you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding. There will be no federal funding.
The NCAA has already indicated that it will move rapidly in order to comply with this new order. After the order was signed, the NCAA announced that trans women, meaning biological men who identify as women, will be barred from competing in NCAA women's college sports. It is ironic that the leftists who pretend to have a meltdown over someone who uses the handle BigBalls being allowed to cut government waste, but they are completely fine with a guy who actually has big balls forcing his way into a ladies' locker room and watching the girls inside change without their consent and then competing against them on an unfair playing field. And you wonder why we don't believe that the positions that you take are very sincerely motivated. Trump signed the order, surrounded by hundreds of adorable little girls wearing their team jerseys, smiling, clapping, and thanking him for standing up for them and no longer expecting them to smile as they forfeit a fair playing field for all of them in favor of one boy's preference to be allowed to play on the girls' team. Riley Gaines and other female athletes who fought against the tide on this issue were also there to see the fruits of their labor as the children celebrated to the song Girls Just Want to Have Fun. The latest polls show that 79% of Americans support this sports ban.
This was one of the big reasons that we all won, and it's one of the big reasons that we had a record, a landslide like they haven't seen before, very often anyway. And who could forget last year's Paris Olympics where a male boxer stole the women's gold medal after brutalizing his female opponent so viciously that she had to forfeit just after 46 seconds, and she was a championship fighter. And actually they had two women or two people that transitioned, and both of them won gold medals, and they won them very convincingly. But all of that ends today because with this executive order, the war on women's sports is over. Service is worried about them. If we have to worry about them, we have big problems. Okay,
Talking about the enormous crowd of little girls signed around him.
Watch what I do, then I'm going to give you some pens, okay?
Gathered around him for the signing.
What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that. I want to make this a really good signature. Because this is, this is a big one, right? Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10. God bless you, Mr. President.
So how is today's executive order going to impact the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles? For example, would a man who thinks that he's a transgender woman be allowed to compete as a female on U.S. soil?
It's a very good question, and the president has actually mentioned this, that he does expect the Olympic Committee and the NCAA to no longer allow men to compete in women's sports. And I think the president, with the signing of his pen, starts a very public pressure campaign on these organizations to do the right thing for women and for girls across the country. Again, this is an incredibly popular position. There have been many notable female athletes who have had the courage to speak out against some very powerful institutions in this country. They deserve to have a voice and a say. The president is bringing their voice to the highest level at the White House this afternoon, and he expects these organizations to comply with this federal executive order that he'll be signing today.
Riley Gaines released this ad after the signing.
Riley Gaines and Sia Leahy are in hot water over their transphobic comments, and I just gotta say, who cares if biological males play in women's sports? Just be inclusive.
Could not agree more. This is just a bunch of fear-mongering from right-wing bigots.
All video of young women preparing to play and receiving nasty messages from the trans community and trans advocates. And it says real strength.
For their lack of success.
Real courage.
Is very much responsible for these boycotts, which have cost her team a playoff bid.
Guess we'll see how Sia handles all that pressure tonight.
Real girls
rock. Okay, and that ad was put out there by thetruthfits.com. You can go check that out.
All right, let us move on to celebrations of a different sort. Celebrity celebrations. In Hollywood's special little bubble, self-proclaimed Hitler fan Kanye West showed up at the Grammys, where he displayed his prized property to the world, his completely naked wife. I don't mean she was wearing a see-through outfit. I mean there was not a stitch on her from head to toe. They were both apparently arrested afterwards for indecent exposure. Put him in with Diddy. They'll have fun. Diddy's probably lonely by now. I'm going to just say what we all know. This guy is a completely revolting piece of shit human being on every level that a person can qualify as trash through the disgusting way that they treat others. I hope that wasn't too vague, because I can be more clear if I need to be. Later in the week, the mentally ill Yo-Yo Yeye took to X in a manic tweeting binge covering everything from bragging about his exploitation of his nude wife, saying that she's been dressing naked for 2 years. Dressing naked. I don't think Ye understands what an oxymoron is. He went on to tweet about other things, including Adolf Hitler posting, quote, "Hitler was so fresh. Call me Yadolf Hitler," says the moron that Hitler would absolutely have gassed. He expressed his desire to be the guy who normalizes talking about Adolf Hitler the way it has been normalized to talk about killing N-words. When did it become normal to talk about murdering N-words? 'Cause I missed that newsflash. He also talked about standing around as he holds his eyes open like a psychopath until any feelings that he is feeling goes away. And then he gave his defense of P. Diddy before concluding that he had channeled Andrew Tate on a few of those tweets, because that wasn't clear to the rest of us. This guy is a walking advertisement for bringing back non-voluntary commitment into mental institutions for the extremely disturbed. But I'm also willing to settle for him and his bros sharing a prison cell together. If this guy is your role model, then all I can say is that you two have a screw loose. Jaden Smith showed up with a house on his head. I'm serious. And his sister Willow came as Jafar, dressed as the old man when he lures Aladdin into the Cave of Wonders with his broken, jagged teeth. Here's a clip.
Trans people are not invisible.
You mean like they don't have superpowers?
I think the problem is that they were very not invisible, actually, during the last election.
We lifted up. Music is love. Thank you.
Trans people aren't invisible, as in they don't have magical powers? Yes, we know. Do you? Beyonce took home the Best Award for Country Album, and look, Beyonce has a good set of pipes, but it was beyond illegitimate that she won Best Country Album for one of the most awful country albums that has ever been recorded. Her version of Jolene should be banned and erased from human history. It's so bad. How is it even possible to screw up Jolene? But this is Hollywood, and these things are now decided based off of narratives and not based on reality, which is why award shows now struggle to have an audience. Speaking of which, the Oscar-nominated man who was up for Best Actress for his role in the movie Amelia Perez may have fumbled a sure thing after an entire archive of his racist tweets, where he ranted against black people, Muslim people, Jews, George Floyd, and his co-star Selena Gomez was uncovered.
Oscar nominee Carla Sofia Gascon is catching heat for controversial takes she posted online in recent years about everything from Islam to George Floyd. The Amelia Perez's Stars posts on X started to make the rounds early Thursday morning and were deleted not soon after. Less than a month after Floyd was murdered in Minnesota in 2020, inciting nationwide Black Lives Matter rallies, Gascon shared these words, saying, "I truly believe that very few people ever cared about George Floyd," and calling him a drug addict and a hustler. Later that year, she took aim at Muslims in her native Spain when she wrote this post that says, in part, "Sorry, is it just my impression, or are there more and more Muslims in Spain? Every time I go to pick up my daughter from school, there are more women with their hair covered and their skirts down to their heels."
To be fair, no one did care about George Floyd before he died. And regardless of what you feel about the events of that day, he was a drug addict and a hustler. So I'm not entirely sure what's controversial about that. May not have been nice to point it out, but not exactly untrue. Anyway, Now he's been canceled, and he's trying to save his Oscar by apologizing.
Oscar nominee Carla Sofia Gascon is apologizing amid online controversy. The Amelia Perez star expresses her regret for recently resurfaced past offensive posts she made on X, formerly known as Twitter, that appeared to target Muslims, the killing of George Floyd, and diversity at the Oscars. In a statement shared to NBC News via a Netflix spokesperson on January 30th, Carla says, quote, "I want to acknowledge the conversation around my past social media posts that have caused hurt. As someone in a marginalized community, I know this suffering all too well, and I am deeply sorry to those I have caused pain. All my life I have fought for a better world. I believe light will always triumph over darkness."
But this attempt failed, and the woke mob was not appeased. He will not be allowed to appear at any Oscar event. The people who were raving about him and holding him up as brave and beautiful only a few weeks ago at the Golden Globes are now throwing him under the bus like the insincere cannibals that they are. So I guess the premise of his movie was wrong after all. Becoming trans doesn't automatically transform you into a good person, since these posts were made after his transition. Who knew? This will shock so many people. Well, not people, celebrities. No, it won't shock them either, because they'd have to have the ability to assess evidence rationally, or at the least add 2 and 2. And geography was never these entertainers' strong suit. Shoot. Ironically, this guy has also previously criticized the Oscars for being too woke. And finally, President Biden signed a contract with Creative Artist Agency. Are they making a remake of Weekend at Bernie's? CAA announced that President Biden is one of America's most respected and influential voices in national and global affairs. What the bleep are you guys smoking, and where can I get some? Yes, this is going to be the start of an illustrious career, I'm sure. And now, immigration ire. Trump ended temporary visas for Venezuelan migrants, which was standing in the way of our being able to deport them. The loophole was protecting 600,000 illegal immigrants from deportation, and now as a result, at least 350,000 of them will lose their deportation protection in 2 months. This caused an anti-ICE protest that shut down the 101 in LA, which is illegal. And if you had grown-ups in charge out there in Cali, they would have been arrested, and you would have been able to go to work, pick up your kids from school, and take your loved ones to the hospital. But this is California, so none of that happened. The sanctuary city politicians ordered the LAPD to stand down and let the brats hold the citizens prisoner for as long as they wanted to. The highway was briefly reopened before more protesters reclogged the thoroughfare, barring traffic once more. California, you created this Frankenstein, and now you're at its mercy. Good luck to you. Meanwhile, things continue to move forward without the slightest blink of an eye in the deportation arena, despite the protests that were going to change everything. Aw. Hysterical temper tantrums don't work as well in the new world as they did in the old one, do they? So sad for you. Guess you'll have to be big boys and girls and use your words to make an actual case for your position. The mayor of Minneapolis, Ethan Fry of BLM infamy, announced that he will not cooperate with any deportations.
I want to speak directly to people who are undocumented. We love you. We care about you. In the city of Minneapolis, we will stand up for you, and we will do anything in our power to help. Because you're not an alien in our city, you're a neighbor. Now, in Minneapolis, we have what is called a separation ordinance. And that separation ordinance states clearly that our city officials, our police officers and beyond, will not be gathering information showing who is and who is not documented. We do not ask the question with regard to immigration status, and because we haven't asked the question, we don't have any data to show documentation status in our city. Our police officers will not be cooperating with federal law enforcement around federal immigration law. We enforce state and local laws here in Minneapolis, and we will do so to the best of our ability. But as for cooperation with ICE, the answer is no.
All I can say to you, Mr. Jacob Fry, is break the law and you'll go to jail. That would make me smile for a month, Mayor Fry. And our new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, ain't joking around. You wouldn't do well in prison, girly man. As the mayor of the city where George Floyd died. So think about it carefully. I know of no one who will shed a tear for you when you're forced to request solitary for your own protection. But I don't think we'll get that pleasure. You know why? Because I think you're a limp noodle who's full of nothing but empty virtue signaling words. But please, prove me wrong. Speaking of which, Governor Phil Murray of New Jersey indicated that he is personally harboring illegal aliens in his own home, which is a felony that is in direct violation of the law.
I don't want to get into too much detail, but there's someone in our broader universe whose immigration status is not yet at the point that they are trying to get it to. And we said, you know what, let's have her live at our house above our garage. And good luck to the feds coming in to try to get her.
I got note of it. Won't let it go. We'll look into it. And if he's knowingly harboring, concealing an illegal alien, that's a violation of Title 8 United States Code 1324. I would seek prosecution, or the Secretary would seek prosecution. So maybe he's bluffing. If he's not, we'll deal with that.
FAFO. This could turn out to be quite a show if one of these blowhards actually has the balls to follow through on their big talk. I'm going to go buy some popcorn just in case. But before I do, for the record, sounds like bravado to me. So how exactly are you going to stop the armed federal government from coming into your home to enforce the law there, Bruce Willis? Are you threatening an insurrection or something? 'Cause my money's on them winning that round in about 4 seconds flat, poser. But there is some actual good news to report. El Salvador agreed to accept deportees from the United States regardless of their nationality, as well as the violent criminals that are currently imprisoned in America, according to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. Trump is looking into the legalities of accepting the offer. President Bukele, who won re-election with 88% of the vote last year, gained a lot of international attention for the new prison system that he instituted in El Salvador in order to deal with the violent gangs who were terrorizing his people. In this system, no visits from wives, girlfriends, or children are allowed. Sleeping arrangements are stainless steel cots stacked several layers high, with each cell containing dozens of inmates, and your roommates will be some of the most senior leaders of Latin America's most notorious gangs. The video released at the time shows armed guards in riot gear corralling 15,000 handcuffed inmates who were barefoot, shirtless, and standing with heads shaved. I would encourage violent repeat offenders in America to take a good look at the videos of the Bukele prison system down there and decide just how badly you still want to F around, because lifestyles of the rich and famous, this is not. And if all of that wasn't enough for week 3 of the Trump administration, we have these bonus events for your informational listening pleasure. Daniel Penny, our very own Marine superhero who saved his fellow citizens on the subway from a drug addict with diagnosed schizophrenia and a history of violent attacks, who was threatening to kill the people on board that day. The same Daniel Penny, who was shamefully tried for the crime of being a good Samaritan and rightly acquitted, has now been hired at an investment firm in Silicon Valley. Good for you. You deserve a good turn from the world for a change. I wish you all the best. Speaking of the heroes who serve, military recruitment has skyrocketed since Trump's victory and Pete Hegseth's appointment as the Secretary of Defense. In anticipation of Trump taking office, December of 2024 saw the Army have its best recruiting numbers in 12 years. The next month was even better. January of 2025, the Army has had its best recruiting numbers in 15 years. America's youth are apparently willing to serve when they feel like it will be for a greater cause and they will be part of something great on behalf of America. Now Hegseth has released an Army commercial that is actually about, get this, the Army, and not about the LGBTQ. Radical. Speaking of an end to DEI policies, Google is killing its prioritization of hitting specific diversity hiring targets. So, if these DEI practices make businesses more profitable, like we've all been told that they do, then why is Google sabotaging itself? Maybe it's because no study actually shows anything of the sort. The study that is often cited does not show that DEI makes businesses more profitable. It shows that businesses that are already profitable tend to go ahead and invest in DEI programs at that point, especially when they are pressured to by the government. But that pressure is gone now, and the tides of culture have also dramatically shifted. Now businesses are scrambling to catch up in an attempt to not alienate their consumers. I think Google owes an apology to the Google engineer that they pilloried for suggesting that maybe the reason that there weren't a lot of female engineers wasn't because someone was blocking their road. It was simply because many women don't have a very big interest in engineering. The Harvard president, who was fired for making a similarly valid point, also deserves an apology. More really good news, according to Politico, Trump is about to finalize an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education via a two-part plan where it would exist long enough to delegate its responsibilities to other departments and then shut down completely. We didn't have a Department of Education before the 70s, and we managed to win 2 world wars and make amazing leaps forward during that time. Every study that has been done, even the ones done by the DOE itself, have only shown a significant decline in education ever since its creation. Thanks for that, too, President Carter. Didn't you get anything right, man? The number one spending priority of the Department of Education in 2024 was $161 billion on federal student aid, forcing the rest of us to finance degrees that have no utility out in the real world and therefore cannot qualify for real loans from real banks out in the real business world because they have no real value. Just another gravy train for bureaucrats, and it's past time to return to a system that produced the minds that got us to the moon. This is great news. So, of course, the media will pretend that the world is ending. By the way, when did journalists become those weird people standing on the street corners holding up signs saying the end is near? Trump is apparently taking the promises that he made the American people more seriously than any other president of my lifetime, and frankly, it's refreshing to a euphoric degree. I'm starting to feel kind of spoiled, people, and it's only been 3 weeks. After 4 years of this, I'm going to be completely ruined for all other presidential administrations. A new executive order from Trump was issued to eradicate anti-Christian bias, which is welcome news for a change. The last administration loved to talk about Islamophobia, although they are protected by several layers of bubble wrap in every single way from any sort of criticism. The only group that you are allowed to be openly biased against and even openly hostile towards without even trying to hide your disdain without consequences is Christians. But there will be no more double standards and no more labeling Catholics as radical traditionalists and domestic terrorist threats and having the FBI target them. No more multi-year prison sentences for peaceful pro-life Christian protesters who pray near an abortion clinic. And no more ignoring more than 100 attacks and acts of violence, theft, and arson that have been committed against Catholic churches, charities, and pro-life centers. and no more standing by while the freedom of religion protections are stripped away from faith-based organizations on university campuses. At the National Prayer Breakfast, President Trump proposed the creation of a new national park that would be filled with the statues of great American heroes, and I love this idea. I am not in any way, shape, or form a fan of the movement made up of empty, lesser men who have made no contributions to the world, yet they tear down the statues of great men who did, just because they were not 100% perfect in every single way, every single minute of every day, and just because they could not foresee into the future and know what the standards of morality would be 2 centuries after they lived and what would be deemed politically correct by then. I am all for any movement to restore, embrace, and empower pride in America once again, because we actually have a lot to be proud of. I am fiercely and unapologetically proud of my country and its heroes.
The stories of legends like Washington, Winthrop, and Williams remind us that without faith in God, there would be no American story. Every citizen should be proud of this exceptional heritage. We have an unbelievable heritage, and we have to use that and make life better for everyone. That's why as we approach the 25th times 10 anniversary, think of that, 250 years we'll be celebrating next year of our country's founding. I have signed an executive order to resume the process of creating a new national park full of statues of the greatest Americans who ever lived. We're going to be honoring our heroes, honoring the greatest people from our country. We're not going to be tearing down, we're going to be building up. It will be called the National Garden of American Heroes.
Trump is also trying to make the Trump tax cuts from his first term permanent. I'm mostly in favor of what he's trying to do, but I am against restoring the SALT cap, which allows people in high tax states to deduct their state taxes from their federal taxes, something that is not allowed for people in other states. I do not think that the people in blue states should get a special tax cut that the rest of us don't get simply because they have made the bad decision to put Democrats, who will tax them into oblivion, in charge of their state. Americans all have equality and are all equally responsible for their choices. So you should pay the same federal taxes whether you live in Florida or California, whether you live in Texas or in New York. And if your state taxes are unreasonably high, then the solution is for you to consider electing more moderate politicians in your own states. Why should I have to contribute more in order to make up for your bad decisions? Trump also wants to eliminate special tax breaks for the owners of sports teams, the partners in investment firms, as well as ending taxes on Social Security benefits and no tax on tips, etc. Wait, I thought that Trump's tax breaks were going to benefit the rich and hurt the poor. Kind of seems like it's the other way around. You mean the media lied to us? Shocker. What will and won't be in the final bill has not been finalized yet, nor is it clear whether there will be an omnibus bill with the tax cuts combined with border security and defense, or whether there will be 2 separate bills, one for the tax issues and a separate one for border security and defense. In Pennsylvania, John Sandville, a school superintendent of Unionville Chadds Ford High School District, was forced to resign after angry questions from parents about his decision to allow a self-identifying genderqueer witch to survey their children on sexual matters and on their sexual history at the end of 2023 school year without their parents' knowledge or consent. So what? Any weirdo can show up at a school now and ask to have access to the kids so that they can talk to them about sex, and the teachers just say, yeah, sure. Yeah, nothing needs to change in education, clearly. The 50-51 movement, something that you've never heard of because it doesn't actually matter at all. And you're also normal and not fringe. But this was a movement to have 50 protests in 50 state capitals in one day. Get it? 50-51. This actually happened on Wednesday, and you didn't notice it because no one cares. They were only able to gather a handful of people, in many cases less than 1,000, and only in a handful of state capitals. They couldn't gather any protesters at all in most of the states. They held up signs saying, "Deport Elon," next to people holding up signs saying, "Education, not deportation." The left is the very best source of unintentional irony on the planet. But what can you expect from empty-headed Stepford protesters? It doesn't have to make sense because they've never actually thought about it. They're all for gun control, except if you use your gun to shoot a healthcare CEO. And they want to defund the police and blow up the justice system, except if it's prosecuting pro-lifers. And now they say that no one is illegal and criminals shouldn't be deported, unless it's the guy that they personally don't like who is actually making meaningful contributions to mankind. There were lots of people in COVID masks and pro-Gaza gear, of course. It was at this incoherent protest that Michigan State Representative Lori Pohetsky made the announcement that she had recently undergone surgery to become voluntarily sterile because of her fear over the non-existent law that Donald Trump has not passed. The guy who just signed an order to enforce women's rights under the protections of Title IX, surrounded by women's activists. She says that someday he might make a law that would be able to force her to become pregnant against her will. A law that literally no one in any party has any plans to try to create or pass. But yeah, go ahead. Undergo radical surgery to your body today because of a childish fear that you claim to have over something that might happen tomorrow, but is actually something that is never going to happen in a million years. That is the rationale of the Democrat Party's thought leaders now. She says that she did this to herself in order to shed light on how serious the issue is. But all that she has actually shed light on is the fact that Democrat voters have to be incredibly unserious in order to elect somebody this delusional with a non-existent grasp on present-day reality and put her in public office and give her power over the legislation that will affect their lives. I'm sorry that this woman is mentally unwell to such a degree that she would actually do this to herself based off of her own overactive imagination. But even so, she doesn't actually get to blame Donald Trump for what she did to herself and demand that we all pity her for it. She had to do this to herself to make her completely invalid point because literally no one else is delusional enough to have spayed themselves the way they usually do their cats when they know that this is completely unnecessary. Even the fringe of the fringe, the handful of people who actually were willing to show up in public at these pathetic protests, had not gone as far as the government official did. Just to be clear, for her delusional fears to be valid, she would have to be living in a country where all 50 states had abolished abortion for every single set of circumstances that you might need an abortion for, at every stage of pregnancy. They would also have to have banned every form of contraception and make it to where you could not even find them on the black market. And even then, you would have the option of abstinence. So you're talking about the actual Handmaid's Tale, where the government subjects all the women in the country to being repeatedly raped until they become pregnant. That would have to be what she is afraid is going to happen for her decision to make any kind of sense. And someone that delusional is, as we speak, a representative of the people of her state. Here's what she previously had to say about women's rights issues in one of her own videos.
I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about how I'm so immensely grateful for all of the work that has gone into advancing abortion rights. Obviously, voters protected the right to abortion in our state's constitution. Here in the legislature, we've been expanding that right and the accessibility to it, but there's a lot more work to do. So the anniversary of Roe v. Wade is a really good time to reflect on everything that we've gotten done, but also acknowledge that we still have our work cut out for us.
By women having their work cut out for them, do you mean having their own reproductive body parts cut out of them, like you did? So let me get this straight. You claim that you have personally ensured that women in your states have these rights, and your effectiveness at ensuring that they have these protections is why you should continue to be elected to serve them in office, while simultaneously claiming that things are so dire that it made sense for you to decide to sterilize yourself because you're living in the Handmaid's Tale where women have no rights at all. Okay, not to be cruel, but assuming that you're even telling the truth about any of this, it was probably the right choice in your particular case for you not to reproduce. If the doctor that did this to you actually exists, he, however, should be prosecuted. Because if I went into a doctor's office and said that I wanted to spay myself because I was afraid that the Democrats were going to physically force me to become pregnant, that should be an indicator that I'm not mentally stable and therefore cannot give informed consent for such a radical procedure. And lest you think that maybe this woman just had a recent breakdown, no, this is not the first time that her melodramatic stunts have gained notoriety for backfiring.
Speaker recognizes Representative Pohatsky.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last November, voters in Michigan overwhelmingly supported Proposal 3. Everyone serving in this chamber was sent here with a clear task after last November. And I am grateful that we are finally addressing it and repealing this archaic and punitive law once and for all. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Now, since you couldn't see that, she originally had a law book open to the correct page, but while she was speaking, a whole bunch of pages fell forward, so that it was now open to a completely different section of the law book. And she hesitated for a moment before continuing on with her theater kid performance by ripping out the wrong page, containing an entirely different law than the one that she was talking about. And with a serious face, she desperately clung to her mic drop moment, which only succeeded in bringing the world to tears in a fit of hysterical laughter. Now, if she could screw up a stunt that simple, something that only required the very advanced technology known as a bookmark, are we even sure that she didn't just have her appendix out? I'm just asking. And finally, the confirmations keep coming. Pam Bondi is officially our new Attorney General. Live long and kick ass. RFK Jr. is not confirmed yet, but he has passed the biggest hurdle and is now all but a shoo-in for the head of the HHS at this point. Tulsi Gabbard is also over the worst and likely to be confirmed. Kash Patel looks like he will be confirmed as well. So, to all of the leftists out there in Congress, from the old guard to the squad and the wannabe squad, all you elites who have terrorized everyone for at least 4 years now, on behalf of the people of this country, I say to you now, it's our party, but you cry if you want to, cry if you want to, cry if you want to. No one cares enough to cry with you. Boop, boop, be-doo. Thank thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this week's episode, please like and follow, because that's what makes these things successful. And either way, I hope you come back next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.